Hello, 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 and welcome to Updog Sports Talk. My name is Matt Miller, and joining me today is a familiar face. But no, it's not Justin's face. We got Tony. What's going on, Tony?
Hey, doing good, Matt. Appreciate you guys having me on.
Hey, appreciate you stepping in for Justin. Today is a big day for him, and so he wasn't able to join us. And so that opens a door to MLS talk. It's a subject that this show has not dabbled in a whole lot, but it's a growing sport, and Tony and I will get into that in just a second. But here at Updog Sports Talk, we pride ourselves on sticking up for the little guy, like MLS, the little guy of professional sports leagues. And when we started this, we noticed that ESPN, the bigger companies, only focused on like the LeBron Jameses, the LA Lakers, all of that. Pat Mahomes, Tom Brady, like they didn't really give two squats at like UT, RGV, Arrows, or anything like that. So we try to represent every team as equally as we humanly as possible. We do have obligatory Cowboys talk about that. But today we are representing the little guy and representing a growing market, but very underrepresented in Major League Soccer. So sit back, relax, enjoy Updog Sports Talk. Giving me a soundboard is terrible. So Tony, go ahead. Talking MLS.
Yep.
What do you want to start with?
You know what? I know the show is really focused around football, and you kind of dabble in college basketball and some of those things. You cast a wide net.
Right.
I was a long time football fan. I played football in high school. A big Bengals fan, a big Michigan fan. I know that drives Justin nuts, and I love it.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Get under his skin. That's the greatest thing in the world.
These last few years have been peak. So I'm never gonna let him forget that.
He certainly spent the majority of your friendship rubbing it in.
I will say he is a gracious winner. He's not like real smug about it, or he's a good sportsman.
Yes.
But
college football 25, different story.
Yeah, oh yeah. That brings out the demons. I think what really got me into soccer, and if anyone's interested, it's the football drought for at least a couple more months. And soccer's, like you said, it's one of the fastest growing sports in America. And that's for a few reasons. Really made a concerted effort to bring in some big names like Messi and Suarez at Inter Miami. Even before that, it was what's his name? Zatlin. He was at LA Galaxy, and David Beckham. So they've tried over time, but I think really with Messi coming over, even though he's kind of in the twilight of his soccer career, that
still one of the best in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you cannot. He's electric with the ball, and just the way he envisions the field, it's so exciting. You can't help but kind of root for him, But really, what got me into it was going to a live match. You go, there's the crowd, there's the atmosphere. It's unlike any other sport.
Yeah.
With football, there's those kind of periods of silence and not movement. That's not the case with soccer. It's always moving. It's like jazz.
Yeah. One thing I noticed about like a lot of MLS teams and even USL teams, their fans are a lot like they're just as passionate as college football fans and as engaged and have their own chants and do all this. And I'm a heckler when I go to games. Like I like to heckle a little bit. And when FC Cincinnati was in USL, they were facing Orlando City B. And this is before they got the new stadium. This was back when they were at Nippert Stadium. I was directly across from where they had the Bailey. So I was in like the U of the bowl. And I'm in the corner. I'm like, yeah, you're going to miss it. Ha ha. And then he hit a PK right in my corner, ran over and shushed me. And yeah. And then the next time I sat like 10 rows up with my wife's boss at an FC game. They're in MLS now. They're playing Inter Miami pre-Messi. There's this guy, and you may know his name. I don't know his name. He had a bleach blonde mullet, tattoos up and down his arms. I think he was a right mid. but he stayed on the same side of the field the whole time. So I guess they switched to him to left mid at that time. And every time he ran past, I'm like, mullet! Every time. And I yelled it so much that a few other people started joining in. My wife's boss had a kick with it, but he was dying laughing. Well, in the 90th minute, there was like, they added 2 minutes. He hit the game winning goal. So I'm no longer allowed to go next to the game, and I have to be quiet. So if that's anything like you, stay away from that Cincinnati. Go to some other team. But
It's funny you mentioned that, Ed. I'm a season ticket holder for FC Cincinnati. We're next to the Bailey, but we're kind of in the bend, like
yeah,
you were. And it's such a good spot because you can see the whole field. There's no one in the way, but we have the a pretty good view of like the wife and player section. So we get to see the players' wives here and there, but there's this guy that's kind of seated along the sidelines every week, and he's always up there when they're taking corner kicks, giving them the business. And I call him the warden, because that's what he's doing. He's locking down that side of the field. So it's a fun atmosphere, and you
oh yeah.
really don't, other than college football, I don't know that you're going to find a better, you know, holistic experience where the vibes are high. It heightens your emotion. You're excited, um, and that's what makes it special.
Playoff basketball, you could say, can
That's
match
true.
it. I've been to a Pacers game, not in the playoffs, but like while they were in the thick of it, and it was electric. Still not quite MLS style. So for those of you who are joining us and are looking for a sport to follow, and your team's no longer in the NBA, maybe you don't like the small market NBA finals. Maybe you aren't a big fan of the pace of baseball. Soccer is a good sport to get into, whether it's MLS, whether it's Premier League. Premier League's a little bit easier to find, but Tony, where can we find MLS games?
Yeah, yeah. So wisely or not, the MLS has an exclusive deal with Apple TV. So for $100 a year, you can see all the games. But and it's interesting, and it's unlike any other sport where that if they're in a tournament, so there's the Leagues Cup, there was the shoot, what's it called? The Lamar Hunt Cup.
Yeah.
That's where the USL and the MLS would play each other. Those would be televised. So I think in some areas they're kind of missing the market by making it so exclusive. If they wanted to sprinkle in some, hey, here's some free weekends, you can watch, all the soccer you want.
Yeah.
I
Maybe even come up with like a channel like the CW or something. Like we get the CW. I don't know how far the CW extends outside of Cincinnati, but FC Cincinnati games are like sometimes on there.
yeah,
Maybe get like a national channel. Maybe USA would be perfect.
yeah,
USA doesn't really have a whole lot going on other than wrestling. But like maybe televised, nationally televised, like a Friday night or a Saturday night game that maybe has high stakes.
yeah. And you know what? That's what they used to do. And there was a period of time between when they moved from the USL to the MLS and took that step that it was televised. And the city of Cincinnati really took it and ran with it. Like people were excited. And then as you kind of make it more about the money and move it away from general broadcast, like you do kind of miss a population of
Yeah.
people, out of
But
sight, out of mind.
I will say I do enjoy them being in one spot more than the NFL has. It does have regularly scheduled games, but then they find Peacock or Amazon or whatever, and then all of a sudden don't know what you're watching, like where to watch or what to do, and then like Peacock does okay, but then like it can break down pretty easily, so then you start missing some plays here and there. I
Yeah.
feel like Apple, I was able to watch a free game on Apple once, and it was seamless. I didn't really have to like miss a whole lot of action. Maybe one of the Apple ads went a little too long, and I missed like a corner kick or whatever. But are there any teams out there that are more like obviously people are located where they are, and there's teams kind of close to where people are located. But like, are there any just general teams that are just good to root for, like good stories?
Yeah, yeah, and I'm sure we'll be getting into this a little bit more, but the footprint of the United States is huge. You look at the UK and all of their leagues, and they're not far apart. And so there's really a big opportunity to impact a lot of people. With soccer, and so honestly, the USL teams, that's some of the most authentic energy you'll feel. When FC Cincinnati moved into the MLS and they got their new stadium, it feels a bit more corporate-y. It's still exciting, but you know a lot of the rivalries are really good for bringing people into the game too. For us, FC Cincinnati, it's the Hell is Real Derby. I think that's sick, and that all came about because the road that you take to get from Cincinnati to Columbus, there's a sign, a big old sign, someone had it, put up that says Hell is Real. And so
And it's
that
been there
kind of,
for like 30 years.
yeah, yeah. And it's like a landmark almost,
Yeah.
and like, that's cool. That's super cool. The LAFC and LA Galaxy, they have El Tráfico, which is kind of a riff on El Clasico
Yeah.
in the Euro leagues. Some of the Canadian teams, they have kind of rivalries that it adds to the flavor of it.
So is there any like particular players on the rise that like somebody getting into could look for? Like some of the names that people may not notice if
Yeah.
they're not soccer fans?
Yeah, and obviously there's the Messis and the Suarezes, but in order for them to have success, they need to have a team around them too. So, over the last couple years, there's this cat down there named Kremeshki, and he's a young gun, and he just really made a big impact. And there's a cat up in Vancouver actually, which is weird. They're doing weirdly so well. His name is Brian White. I think he scored 4 or 5 goals in a night. He has 10 goals on the season, played 11 games. So like he's hitting it with some efficiency. And I was kind of doing some research on him, and he's been with the club for like 5-6 years. So it's those things that you get to watch the player develop. One of the big differences between soccer and football is you may have a player that's only there for a half a season, or they're on loan from another club, and that's so foreign when we think about American sports, and people just come and go. So it can be sometimes tough, and especially with the MLS and soccer in America, a lot of the players, their biggest dream is to play, for Europe or somewhere else. So part of it is how do we take the narrative to, bring the talent here, homegrown talent, competitive talent, and I think that's the big picture of what the MLS is trying to do.
So we'll get back to that because I have a few thoughts on that. But to break it down for people, there's not trades. There's not trades in soccer. They have a transfer window. So you have to front money to the team to just be able to contact the player and come up with a contract for the player. So they have specific windows. There's 2 windows. There's still 2 windows in MLS.
Yes.
So there's 2 windows that they can negotiate. And then once the window cuts off, any negotiations that take place after that take place the next window when it opens. So that, and getting to our next point, and we'll get back to what you were just talking about in a minute. The USL, as you were telling me, has come up with a relegation system. And I know a lot of college football fans out there have been wanting relegation to make it more competitive. But here, USL is, setting up a second league for this?
Yeah. So they have a USL Champions League, and that's kind of if we're looking qualitatively between the USL and MLS, there's some that are, could fit in that mix, but the talent isn't as strong. And then there's a league below that too, and so there's about 24 teams in each conference. And earlier this year, maybe it was a little towards the end of last year, they said that they were going to bring about a relegation system. I think for 2027, 2028, which to me that's huge. Yeah. It's a huge opportunity for soccer to expand in America, but it also adds stake. And that's that's what sports are about. It's the moments, it's the narratives, and a relegation system would really go a long way, I think, in American sports.
Yeah, I think like here in Cincinnati, there's a city north of us called Dayton, and a lot of you know Dayton from playing basketball or John Gruden or whatever. If they were to set up a soccer team, and let's say they get into USL League One and work their way up, I think that would be a cool story to, like, if MLS were to come up with a partnership and have a relegation system between those two leagues, to where, like, if Dayton work their way up, they can get into the MLS, and then, like, all of a sudden now you have another rivalry. I-70 rivalry could be the name for the Columbus Crew and whatever Dayton's team would be named, or like 75 rivalry, or whatever you want to call it, the corridor rivalry or whatever. So then now you have like a trifecta rivalry, and then you start adding in teams. I think that would be fantastic. I told you we would come back to what you were saying, but my ADHD just threw it out the window and said, you know what, we're talking about something now.
That's okay, because I'm the same way, dude. We're on an adventure.
Yeah, this show may never end. So, I know it's not on our docket that we brought up, but, like, do you think the All-Star game is needed? Like, I know MLS tries to compete with the other American sports with, like, an All-Star game. So do you think that would necessarily be needed? Or do you think it would be better just to get rid of it and then just bring in the relegation system so there's more attractiveness?
Yeah, I think the issue with the All-Star game is there's so many interruptions during the soccer season. There's international play, they do breaks to allow players who are playing for their country to, leave, and it doesn't impact, the team performance. But then, for example, we had a guy, Miles Robinson, he was on the Olympic team, and he was playing for the U.S. men's national team. So, you can miss big chunks of time. And then they sprinkle in the Leagues Cup, which is, the MLS playing the Liga MX, which is the team down in Mexico. And could it be a cash grab? Probably, probably. But I think it somewhat disrupts from the continuity of the season. It adds an element of, what if a player gets hurt while on international duty, or, during this Leagues Cup game. For a while, the MLS and USL were a part of the Lamar Hunt Cup, and that was like a, David and Goliath Cup. And a lot of the MLS teams would play their, some of their younger talent, or, they wouldn't bring on their stars until, the quarterfinals, and so I think the All-Star game kind of gets a similar rap where, it pulls the players out, it adds to the fatigue, but it's also an honor, like to be the best in, the country. That's a huge honor. I know a few years back they did, it was the best in the MLS against Arsenal from the Premier League.
Yeah.
They were in like, the prime of their season, and, anytime you have a cohesive team playing even the best of the best, that cohesion and, like, connection is going to show up. It's going to count for something. So it was a slaughter. I think it was like 7-1. So, I don't know that we need to do that, but yeah. It was cool, I guess. If you're an Arsenal fan, you could see some of the best that we have, and, see what Arsenal has.
Well, before we get to our next point, do you think that, like, MLS should come up with some type of partnership in England where Like maybe there's like a cup that they play, like they meet up in like Toronto or just one location, and then it's just like the top teams or whatever teams are invited to this cup, and they just play through this cup real quick and then go back to their leagues. Like, do you
Yeah,
think like how the Champions League is all of Europe? Like, do you think that that would work for MLS to try to do?
I think it could. They have something, and it's not exactly that, but it's called the Club World Cup. And it's so, if FC Cincinnati won the MLS, they won it all. They could be up against, the Liverpools or, whichever club. And so it's basically a World Cup, but rather than a country, it's a club. And so, there is an opportunity for them to play each other there. But, I think I don't know if we're ready for that yet, just based on the talent discrepancy. I think with time that would be a great a great model to try to emulate, but then also it would be a kind of a known rival, and then excitement of a smaller less popular sport in America to
Well, I know I threw you for a couple of loops there, so we'll get into stuff that we actually did plan on talking about. So Philly is on fire right now. Their goal difference is vastly different than everybody else in the league. So are they running away with it right now? Like how's everything shaping up?
it was so Philly traded one of their kind of not star players, but he was kind of a lion killer. His name is Daniel Gazdog, and we played them, and it was like 4-0. It was a slaughter, and ever since they've just been rising. A goal differential of 14. That's huge. So for those that may not know, the league table is based on points. You get 3 points if you win, 1 point if you draw, 0 points if you lose. And then kind of the tiebreaker is the goal differential. So, the other team that I'm looking at and kind of scratching my head about is Vancouver, because they were not like that last year, and they just came on so strong. They've almost been undefeated. They've lost one game, but they have a 18 plus differential, and that's where that Brian White plays for. So, it's a long season, temper expectations. This whole thing could flip on its head at any time. But, we're seeing the usuals. Philly, they have a really strong development program and academy. One of the best in the country, I think. FC Cincinnati, not to toot our horn, but they're doing pretty good.
They got a good complex for the B squad.
Yeah. We had the Columbus Crew. You can never ever count them out.
No, they're like the Pittsburgh Steelers of MLS. Like,
yeah,
not just because of the colors, but like they're just always there.
Yeah, they're there. They're in the coach that they have, Wilfred Nancy. He's a cold dude, and he's got them, zinging. So I could, as much as I hate to say it, I could see them, taking another run at the Supporters Shield, or even, winning.
It's just so funny how like I'm rooting for the MLS, but it's still pretty fragile for like keeping these teams where they're at. Like, you're gonna keep like the who's a New York team, the New York Red Bulls that have been around for a while. They're probably gonna stay. Philly Union is gonna stay, but like a couple years ago, it was rumored that Columbus Crew were gonna move to make Austin FC.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden they beat FC Cincinnati to win the Shield. So it's like that's how quickly things can change, not just on the table for like the standings, but also like where teams are located.
Yeah, and that I will forever give them grief for that. That they were fixing to pack up shop and move out. That's not good. It's not good fan base, and they were even mad about it. It was kind of an owner's decision. You mentioned these. So like San Diego FC, this is the first year that they're in the MLS. To have 30 points is insane. When FC Cincinnati took the jump from USL to MLS, we
would have been relegated.
Yeah. we were the bottom of the barrel for 3 years. And in soccer, the last team or the last place team gets what they call the wooden spoon. We got that damn spoon 3 times. And so, St. Louis City SC came on the scene. I want to say it was 2023 was their first season. Started out the gate on fire. They were one of the top clubs. And then I think maybe it's similar to quarterbacks in the NFL where it takes a season to really get acclimated and diagnose where their weaknesses are to exploit from a defensive perspective. So maybe
some of it goes into the transfer window. I mean, sometimes they may get someone who just lights the world on fire, like the Vancouver with Brian White is his name. Like, who knows? Maybe in a couple of years, some team approaches them and wants to give them $14 million just to talk to the kid. Now they have $14 million in their pocket that they can either pay the rest of the team with or go out and get another star. So, that's how, these soccer teams do it. Unless you're, the top of the Premier League or the top of, if you're, Paris Saint-Germain, you're the ones spending the money on, the Brian Whites to go add him to your team. You're not selling players to get more money all the time. So, I watched FC Cincinnati do that with Mitch, what's his name? The goalkeeper, the first couple years.
Oh, yeah.
He went down to Atlanta. I think they got $3 million from him, and then they invested that money so nicely in young talent. So just the whole system that the MLS, not just MLS, but all of soccer has, I think is far superior to all other over all other sports.
I would agree. It's interesting, and one of the things that's interesting about the contracts and how those work is, in the NFL, there's always that one-upsmanship of okay, I want to be the highest paid quarterback, I want to be the highest paid wide receiver, and then it just keeps climbing. In the MLS and soccer in general, they only release salaries once a year, so that kind of tamps down how wild the market can get on any one player, and so I think that's pretty cool. In my day job, I'm a compensation analyst, so I kind of resonate with that a little bit. That makes sense to me.
So, looking at the table here, are there any teams mid-pack in either the East or the West that you would feel that could make a run later this year?
Yeah, I think the Eastern Conference top 6 are probably going to be the ones that finish on the higher end. Atlanta is one of those teams that invested a boatload of money and they haven't seen it pay off. The Western Conference and the way they're set up, we only play them maybe 5-6 teams a year, and the rest are two games each within your conference. It's sometimes hard to keep track of them. LAFC, they're one of the big ones. The Seattle Sounders and Portland, those are some gritty, they've been in the league for a long time. They've built a fan base, and going to a Timbers game, that's kind of on the bucket list because it's this crazy environment. So that's a side note, though. The one that I'm most surprised about is LA Galaxy. What in the world is happening there? Yeah. They've won one game all season. One.
For people who are new to MLS, that would be like if you're a Premier League person, LA Galaxy having one win would be like if Manchester City would be one win, or if the Dallas Cowboys spent millions of dollars or billions of dollars on their roster, and then all of a sudden they're one win. This is crazy.
And they're obviously considered a large market, but they've had their corner on the league for years and years because they draw in all this top talent, and so to see them at the bottom it's
yeah. Do you remember I think he was a tack mid for the Sounders. Remember his name? Years ago? Maybe he was a striker.
I think I know who you're talking about.
think his name is Landon Donovan.
Eh, what a great segue that
Yeah.
was.
Um. Did you hear about the beef going on?
It's one of those things. You see these players. You know how much they're given to the game. You see the media. Kind of criticizing. It's a complex topic, but it's if you had a drama alert button, that'd be the one.
So this was in response. I think I have another window. Let me get the original. So this is what Landon Donovan, who is now the manager of the U.S. men's national team, this is what he had to say about. This was like a subtweet. This wasn't even attacking someone personally. This was in the media talking about his own player. Like you guys can read it, but I can read it out loud. This is what it means to represent your country. If you don't want to take this as a professional soccer player and someone who gets the opportunity to wear that jersey and take it seriously and responsibly, then don't come in. Ronaldo's 40 years old. He played a long ass season. He's tired. He's out there grinding, and he hurt himself in the process. I can't help but think about some of our guys on vacation right now, not wanting to play in the Gold Cup. It's pissing me off. Can you shed some light on what brought that to light?
Yeah, yeah. So the U.S. men's national team has been having a bit of an identity crisis. It's been called kind of the golden age of the U.S. men's national team with the talent and the talent that they have and them being young too. They can stay around and have a really big impact on the team. The last year, there was a lot of criticism because the coach, there was some disagreements with his tactics and which that's always going to be the case. But then they brought in this new coach, and he was supposed to be touted as the real deal. He did a lot of work at Dortmund, and the last three teams that he was with went on to win something. So he's doing something right. And in the last four games that he's been managing, the U.S. men's national team's gone 0-4. They played Switzerland yesterday, and I think it was like a 4-zip whooping. And so I can understand the media, and then so Landon Donovan, he's one of the pundits for, I think it's CBS, one of them, but he's been there, he's done it, he's given it all for his club and country, and so coming from that space, I could see him saying that, and it was mostly directed towards the Gold Cup, which has the United States, and they play other countries, so it's almost like a mini World Cup. And so it's a really good opportunity to see how your team gels, see the tactics, and really test it at a high level. And you have Christian Pulisic and some other really big stars on the team who are sitting that cup out. And so that's where he's coming from. Of if you're not trying, this has to be an honor. You have to do it for club and country. That's where he's coming from. And he'd done it all. Landon Donovan has. He was in World Cups. He was on the U.S. men's national team. The MVP award is named after him. So he's kind of he kind of has some perspective here. But then Christian Pulisic's dad slides into the scene, and so this is a screenshot from his dad. He asked ChatGPT or Grok or one of them, Landon Donovan's sabbatical and why did he take it? So this is where it gets tricky. When he was playing, he was certainly on the older end. He's not the same age as Christian Pulisic, so it's not apples to apples. I think he was in his 50s perhaps, and that's after you've played for so long. Taking a sabbatical isn't it's not the end of the world. It's a maintenance task to allow you to continue to play longer. And so his dad kind of called him out, and kind of like, break it down break it down for us, and why did he do that? And so that really kind of, that sparked the debate. Now, there's a lot of people on, Christian Pulisic's side. They call him, Captain America. Like he's maybe one of the better talents that we've ever had. He played for AC Milan. He was tearing it up out there. So, he's from Landon Donovan's perspective. He's saying you shouldn't be leaving some in the tank to perform for your club to make the money. The country should come first. And so, the narrative is, great message, Landon Donovan, but you shouldn't have been the one to say it. And that's where all the juicy stuff is.
Yeah. So men's national team has been piss poor for a while. Like, what was it? The last time they played, they lost in the first game and exited very quickly. What's disappointing is, as Americans, we like to hold ourselves to a high physical standard, though most of the population may not look it. What we like to do is when we get something sports related, we're like, hey, we're better. And then soccer is one of those sports where it turned out pretty quick. No, we're not. Women, different story. Women's national team is phenomenal. My wife and I are actually looking at going to a Louisville, what is it,
Yeah.
FC game next weekend, or in a few weeks. They have Muhammad Ali night, and it's like Louisville and Orlando have like most of the women's national team on it, so almost all of the national team will be showcased in one game. So we wanted to go and show her support, and like my wife, big into women's sports all of a sudden, so the fact that I got her into sports, fantastic. I will run with that as far as I can. So gonna go check them out. I can't imagine tens of thousands of people would show up. So, but I mean, like, women's sports surprise me sometimes. I mean, with it being that big of a game, you may have all of Louisville there. Like,
yeah, and I'll tell you what, the stadium down there, because I've checked out a few of the USL stadiums. I've been up to Detroit. That one was kind of weird. It was in an old train yard. And, there's trains going by. I'm like, what happens if the ball, gets kicked out of bounds and, hits a train, I've been to Louisville a couple times, and their stadium, better than some in the MLS.
yeah.
By a lot. It's a good environment. You guys will have a great time.
What I like about, like, women's soccer is there's actually a decent following for women's soccer. Like, JJ Watt, his wife plays. I don't know if she's playing currently. I think, didn't they just have a kid and she's out on maternity leave or something?
Yeah, that sounds right.
But she's a part of it. Like, you're starting to hear bigger names, and like women's national team gets a lot of names out there too, but it's one of the women's sports that like can back up what they do. Women's basketball it's not the best thing to watch. Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese are bringing a lot of notoriety to a sport that desperately deserves it. But from an income ratio, they're not making a whole lot of money. Women's soccer is actually making the money that they're, maybe not to the extent of the men, but they're definitely ahead of other women's sports. And it's really cool to see. But like, the state of soccer in America is fantastic because, like, baseball, I love baseball dearly. I absolutely love it. I love playing it. I love watching it. I think going to games is fantastic. It's a fun time to just chill, hang out with your friends. Maybe do 9 hot dogs, 9 beers, and 9 innings. See if you can do that. But like, it's going down. A lot of people don't want that pace, especially in like how our lives are set up now. We want to be able to do something and then go do something else. Baseball used to be one of those things where you had to block out most of your day to go to. Soccer isn't the case. I mean, you have a set 90 minutes. Maybe it doesn't actually take an hour and a half, but like probably a couple hours for breaks and stuff.
Yeah.
A lot of time and everything. So you have a couple hours. Then you can go out and hang out and do whatever you want. Like NFL, looking rigged. College football, kind of starting to separate to top tier leagues, the conferences. MLS just seems like it's more pure. There's a lot of drama there that doesn't get talked about. Sometimes it rears its head in the national media, but like unless you're in on it, you don't really notice the MLS drama. And like if you were to just type in MLS drama today, I bet you there's a ton out there that we haven't even touched on.
I got some drama for you.
But what's that?
So, Captain Lucho Acosta, he's like 5'2", the little magician. He was a wizard with the ball. And, he gave FC Cincinnati some of the best years of in club history. He was everything Cincinnati needed him to be and more. And so, FC Cincinnati exited the playoffs very early last year, and he was frustrated. And he says, this may be the last game I play for Cincinnati. And that took so many people by surprise. And then
there was no indication of this leading up. Everyone thought he was going to be, like, they were going to put statues outside the stadium. Like, people thought he was going to be there for his entire, like, maybe not entire career, but definitely a lengthy stretch.
Yeah, he was truly a hero. He led them to the Supporters' Shield, which is, that's when you make it through the whole season and you have the most points. That is extremely difficult to accomplish, And so there was a lot of things that went on with, his departure, but, he wanted to get shopped out to Argentina, where he's originally from. There's some disagreements with the club. He basically forced his way out. And in the 11th hour, we kind of moved him over to FC Dallas. So FC Dallas came into TQL Stadium, I think it was like the 18th of May, or, it was last month. And, the crowd booed him. And there's a video of him, he's like walking to take a corner kick, and he's like, okay, I've done all this for the city. I think I've earned that. And one of the questions leading up to the game is, how will TQL respond to him being back? And so many fans were betrayed by him, because he forced his way out. It wasn't that he left, and that doesn't necessarily tarnish his legacy, but the way in which he left certainly put a bad taste in people's mouth.
You know what that reminds me of? When Paul George and the Pacers had just taken LeBron to Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals and lost again for like the third straight year. And then all of a sudden, like a year or two later, Paul George is like, hey, I don't want to be in Indy anymore. This place sucks. I don't want to be here. Get me out of here. So Indy lost all their trade value. And it wasn't like a behind closed doors, like, hey, look, guys, I can't do it here anymore. He went to the media. So, like, Acosta coming out to say that is a lot like the Paul George thing. So it rubbed a lot, because fans are very passionate about their team. When it comes to fandom, you don't really care about the player. You care about what the player is doing for your club.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate, because, that can blur some lines of morality and whatever.
Yeah.
But, like, I don't see any problem with booing Acosta, but you also have to remember what he did for this club. Has he been the same level with FC Dallas?
No, the last time I checked, he had more yellow cards than he had goal contributions.
Jeez.
Which is, and I was having this discussion with my friend, once we shipped Acosta out, we brought in a guy from Portland. What's his name, dude? Why am I blanking on his name?
I know, I was about to ask you about him.
Yeah, Evander. He's replaced him, but not in the same way, and just after watching Acosta play and how he moved, and he was one of those players that as the game got more and more intense, he would rise to that level of, and he would pull out some magic, and so we were kind of discussing, the impact that he has on, the team as a whole compared to Evander. I wouldn't want to get rid of Evander. He's been great. He's also a bit of a wizard, he's younger. But, it's one of those things of, how much role does one player have on your team? And from a risk perspective, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket, so I think we kind of over-relied on him, and then we got burnt by it when he left.
Yes. Because, if he would have stayed, we would have had to pay him a lot of money.
Yeah.
which probably would have been taken from the defensive side. So then you have center backs more than likely getting either less money or shipped out because now we can't afford them. So, I mean, ultimately, probably best for the club. But watching him play was literally, like, a lot of people say, oh, you're just a fanboy. But literally watching him play for FC Cincinnati was like watching, like, a Ken Griffey Jr. or someone play. Like, it was that exciting. Like, he was an absolute wizard, like you said. And you could feel the energy rising in the stadium. And you almost could feel as the energy was rising that he was going to do something. Like, you were like, okay, here it comes. This is his time. You can feel it now. So, like, it sucks that FC Cincinnati doesn't have that, like expectation. Like, Inter Miami has Messi. The expectation is Messi's going to save them if something happens. But Evander, 6 assists in, what was it, 10, 12 games, 15 games, something like that. That's not bad. I mean, I would rather see more goals, but I mean, if you get an assist, that means someone else is scoring a goal, so that's good.
Exactly. Yeah, and I will say FC Cincinnati, they didn't shy away from throwing the dough. We went and getting Evander from Portland was the highest interleague transfer to date. Mm-hmm. I think it was north of 12 million, I believe. But we went and got, he's from I can't remember if it's the Dutch league. It's one of the European leagues, but not the Premier League, not the German league or France. But he was the Golden Boot winner. And so, he's really exciting to watch, but the energy, it's not the same. You got me thinking, reminiscent about my boy. And he would do something cheeky. He'd kick the ball through someone's legs, and then that would just light a spark, and he'd just be banging on all cylinders. And like, that is exciting. That's why we watch sports. That is what draws people in.
Maybe he felt that Cincinnati was cursed and couldn't get past Columbus Crew or something.
I often wonder that myself.
Do you have anything else MLS related, soccer related?
No. That I'm wearing this USL Phoenix Rising. They're in the USL Champions League. I wanted to give a shout out to my boy Charlie Dennis. He's been had some injuries over this season, and came off the bench and scored a goal, and it was a good one. So I just wanted to give him a shout out, and hopefully encourage you guys to take a look at some of the highlights. That's how you'll get into the game. Yeah. Watching those creamy goals, the half court shots, and the screamers, and just the trickery. It's unlike any other sport.
Yeah. Kind of tying it all together, football, soccer, all of it. Here at Updog Sports Talk, we're huge advocates, and we bring it up probably once a month on Twitter. Huge advocates for the Cincinnati Chili Bowl, which would have been played in TQL Stadium. Unfortunately, the boneheads at the NCAA decided that they didn't want another bowl game. But boneheads at the NCAA, if you decide that you do want another bowl game and you want it in a cold weather city, that can give you a good action-packed feel with, I don't know, maybe a Gold Star mascot with a Skyline mascot and maybe a couple other mascots and some random Cincinnati-ness going in there. I think that would be super dope. You could have like a sausage run like they do at the Milwaukee Brewers games. Maybe you can have an edible costume, like the Pop-Tart Bowl. Maybe it's just made out of Cincinnati chili, and the dude's just sweating on some chili all game.
Spilling the chili like Kevin,
yeah. Office reference, love it. But bring back the Cincinnati chili bowl idea. Everybody wants it. Just let it happen.
I'm an advocate.
Well, that is all for today's show. Follow us at Updog Sports Talk on X, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. We're now on Reddit. Follow us on Reddit. You can listen to us, obviously, here on YouTube, live at 8 p.m. on Wednesdays. But you can also listen to us on Podbean, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube Music. Pretty much wherever you get your podcasts, we're on it. Pretty much wherever you get your social media, we're on it. Like, subscribe, follow, comment. We love hearing from everybody. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Tony. We'll see you guys.
Hey, thank you.